"I'm going to kill you for what you did to me." These were the words spoken by a man suffering from severe delusions as he approached a royal guard with a loaded weapon. What happened next saved multiple lives. Royal guards are known for their stoicism and discipline, but beneath the ceremonial uniform stood a man whose training was about to be tested. His heart raced, but his expression remained unchanged. This is the story of how one guard's training kicked in when it mattered most, and how his understanding of mental health crises led to an unexpected outcome. The techniques he used are now being taught to security personnel worldwide. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more real Royal Guard stories. A Royal Guard stands at his post, morning sun reflecting off his polished buttons as tourists snap photos. His scarlet tunic and bearskin cap make him an irresistible attraction. Behind his stoic expression lies a vigilance few visitors comprehend. This is Sergeant James Harrington, 32, 7 years with the Queen's Guard, on another day of ceremonial duty. The tourists see a statue while he sees potential threats. They attempt jokes to break his concentration, unaware of the constant mental calculus happening behind his unwavering gaze. James scans the crowd methodically, dividing the plaza into quadrants, assessing each person like pieces on a chessboard. His legs ache beneath his perfect posture, but his focus never wavers. "People think we're decorative," James would later explain. "They don't realize we're fully operational soldiers with combat experience. The ceremonial duty is one facet of our responsibilities." Royal Guards undergo intensive threat assessment training, learning to identify dangers through subtle behavioral cues while appearing completely still, a skill that transforms them into living sentinels. They learn to identify behavioral anomalies, assess crowds, and memorize escape routes for VIPs in emergencies. James's previous tours in Afghanistan honed the same hypervigilance that serves him now. The battlefield taught him to spot anomalies in normal patterns. The palace grounds simply offer a different terrain to monitor. The discipline that kept him alive in combat zones sustains him through hours of ceremonial stillness. His wife Sophie and daughter Lily see the pride of the uniform, not the weight of responsibility it carries. Like the tourists, they glimpse only the ceremonial facade, not the trained soldier beneath. Security teams handle approximately 1,500 potential incidents annually. Most interventions remain invisible to the public, precisely as intended. This morning, James notices something concerning. A disheveled man has circled the plaza repeatedly. His movements lack tourist patterns. No photos, no maps, no companions. Despite warm weather, he wears a heavy jacket zipped to the neck, muttering to himself and gesturing at nothing. James's peripheral vision tracks the man's erratic path. The behavior matches multiple threat indicators: repeated reconnaissance, inappropriate dress, visible psychological distress, and isolation within the crowd. When the man pauses near school children, James signals the security coordinator through an imperceptible adjustment of his ceremonial staff. This triggers a silent alert to plainclothes personnel without creating alarm. The man's right hand repeatedly checks inside his jacket, another red flag. His gaze fixes directly on James with unmistakable intent, his walk transforming from meandering to determined. Two plainclothes officers position nearby but maintain distance. James prepares mentally for multiple scenarios while preserving his ceremonial stance. His muscles ready to respond in milliseconds if necessary, the guardian statue prepared to spring to life. While James stands vigilant at his post, the man approaching him inhabits an entirely different reality. To the tourists snapping photos and milling about, Michael Bennett appears as just another visitor, perhaps a bit disheveled, a little too focused, but otherwise unremarkable. What they cannot see are the invisible threads of delusion pulling him forward. The absolute conviction that this guard in scarlet is not a stranger, but the architect of his suffering. Michael's path to this moment began 18 months ago. Once a financial director at a mid-sized accounting firm, meticulous and respected, his life unraveled with stunning speed. Economic downsizing claimed his job, his wife requested a divorce, and a flood destroyed what little remained. As his external world collapsed, his mind began to fracture like ice on a warming pond, thin cracks spreading outward until the entire surface could no longer hold. "We noticed changes gradually," his sister Elizabeth later told investigators. "He became convinced his former boss was monitoring his computer. Then he thought the divorce lawyer had installed cameras in his apartment. We tried to get him help, but he'd always been so independent." 9 months ago came the first psychotic break. Michael appeared at his ex-wife's home in the dead of night, insisting that they were coming. After a brief psychiatric hold revealed paranoid schizophrenia, the system that should have caught him instead let him slip through widening cracks. Appointments scheduled weeks apart, medication abandoned, minimal insurance coverage, and family without legal authority to intervene. Each failure another step toward the inevitable. Persecutory delusions typically focus on institutions or authority figures, explains Dr. Vanessa Liu, forensic psychiatrist. The mind creates connections that don't exist, finding evidence everywhere. Without treatment, these beliefs calcify into absolute certainty. The Royal Guard uniforms became the center of Michael's delusion, appearing first in dreams, then at the corners of his vision. His apartment walls transformed into a constellation of newspaper clippings and hand-drawn connections, mapping a conspiracy only he could see. The red coats became beacons in his personal darkness, signaling both danger and direction. The morning of the incident, Michael woke with what his journal described as perfect clarity. He shaved, dressed immaculately, and ate breakfast. Domestic rituals performed as prelude to chaos. The handgun, purchased months earlier during his divorce, waited in his jacket pocket. "He called me that morning," his brother Thomas later recounted, voice breaking. "He sounded calmer than he had in months. He said he had finally figured everything out. I tried calling back a dozen times, even called the police. But what could I tell them? That my brother sounded too normal?" Now, as Michael approaches James with unwavering purpose, two worlds advance toward collision. Duty facing delusion, each step bringing them closer to a moment that will transform both their lives forever. The space between James and Michael narrowed to mere feet, the crowded plaza falling away as their worlds collided. In the Royal Guard's training, this moment, the final approach of a genuine threat, exists as a theoretical exercise. Now, it had become terrifyingly real. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, the next 90 seconds expanding into what would feel like hours in James's memory. "I know what you did," Michael whispered, his voice trembling with rage as he came within arm's reach. The words carried a disturbing intensity that instantly differentiated this encounter from thousands of routine tourist interactions. James maintained his ceremonial stance, but made a subtle weight shift, creating crucial reaction space. His breathing remained measured, 4 counts in, 4 counts out, a technique from crisis response training. Royal Guards are trained to make minute adjustments that create tactical advantages without breaking ceremonial form, explains Captain William Thorne, former head of Royal Protection Training. As Michael's right hand moved toward his jacket, James performed a rapid threat assessment. 23 tourists stood within 15 feet. 2 security team members were positioned at the perimeter but would need precious seconds to intervene. His ceremonial rifle remained loaded only with blanks. James recognized the glazed look in Michael's eyes, the disconnect between perception and reality. In that heartbeat, he decided to engage. "I understand you're upset," James said, his voice projecting calm authority. The guard employed what crisis negotiators call verbal bridging, acknowledging emotions without validating delusions. He broke protocol by speaking, but it was absolutely the right call, notes Dr. Eleanor Walsh, behavioral psychologist specializing in crisis intervention. James maintained eye contact while angling his body like a shield positioned before vulnerable pieces, a bladed stance that placed him between Michael and the closest tourists. The guard was creating protective geometry, explains former tactical instructor Samuel Reed. Every movement reduced his vulnerability while extending security around civilians. Michael's fingers fumbled at his jacket, sweat glistening on his forehead despite the mild temperature. James had learned these physiological indicators during a specialized mental health awareness course added to Royal Guard training recently. "I'd like to hear more about what's troubling you," James said, using techniques designed to build rapport. Then, the watershed moment. "I'm going to kill you for what you did to me!" Michael shouted, pulling a loaded handgun from his jacket and pointing it at James's chest. The plaza erupted in screams. James remained still, processing options rapidly. His right hand moved slightly toward his ceremonial sword before stopping, a decision made in milliseconds. With the barrel aimed at his heart and civilians still within the line of fire, James made a decision that defied conventional protocols. What we witnessed was the product of extraordinary emotional intelligence, Dr. Walsh would later testify. The guard recognized that de-escalation would come through human connection rather than force. That human connection came in a form no one could have anticipated, not through practiced protocol, but through James's willingness to reveal his own vulnerability as a weapon was trained on his chest. "I have a brother who hears things that aren't real too," James said, his voice steady but soft enough that only Michael could hear. "Some days he thinks the government is broadcasting messages through his teeth." The unexpected words hung in the air. Michael's finger remained on the trigger, but his eyes flickered with recognition. This wasn't in any Royal Guard training manual. James had broken from script, stepping away from the formal barrier his uniform represented. "I don't know what you're seeing or hearing right now," James continued, "but I know it feels completely real to you. I see that you're suffering." James maintained eye contact, his posture open despite every instinct screaming to protect himself. "Michael, that's your name, right? I'm not the person you think I am." Michael blinked rapidly, the weapon wavering slightly. "How do you know my name?" His voice emerged hoarse, uncertain. "The security team recognized you from your ID badge. You used to work at Mercer and Finch," James improvised, drawing on the glimpse he'd caught of an old employee badge visible from Michael's open jacket. This small, factual anchor, something real amid Michael's delusions, created a moment of doubt. The gun lowered just half an inch. James seized the opening. "My brother David started hearing voices after he came back from Iraq. Some days he doesn't recognize me. Is that happening to you right now?" It was this moment of shared humanity. Not the uniform, not the authority, but the admission of a personal struggle that penetrated the fog of Michael's delusion. "The brilliance of Harrington's approach," explained Dr. Maria Fernandez, specialist in schizophrenia spectrum disorders, was that he acknowledged Michael's subjective experience while gently introducing doubt about its interpretation. He offered an alternative framework that allowed Michael to question his perception without losing face. Michael's gun hand trembled visibly now. "They said you were watching me." The conviction in his voice had diminished. "I wasn't watching you before today," James said truthfully. "But I see you now, Michael. I see someone who's having a hard time sorting out what's real." James spoke softly about his fictional brother's struggles with medication, good days and bad days. Each detail was fabricated but emotionally authentic, creating a genuine connection. "Would you let me help you find the kind of help my brother got?" James asked. "No one has to get hurt today." The resolve in Michael's face crumbled. The gun lowered to the ground. In that moment, two security team members approached calmly from behind. One gently took the weapon while the other supported Michael as his knees buckled. As Michael was guided to waiting medical personnel, he looked back once at James. No words were exchanged, but something passed between them. A connection between two human beings who, in different circumstances, might never have understood each other at all. While the security footage captured the resolution of the standoff, it couldn't record what happened in the months and years that followed. After the headlines disappeared and the commendations were filed away, two men who met at gunpoint embarked on separate journeys that would eventually converge again. this time without weapons or uniforms between them. The media storm passed quickly. James received formal praise for his exceptional judgment and humanitarian approach, though he later told Dr. Walsh the attention made him deeply uncomfortable. Like seeds planted in disturbed soil, both men's lives were uprooted before finding new ground. Michael began his recovery in a secure psychiatric ward at Queen Elizabeth Hospital with a comprehensive treatment plan. Dr. Catherine Winters, a specialist in trauma-informed care, took charge of his case. What made the difference for Michael was consistent therapy, proper housing support, and a sense that someone truly cared about his recovery, Dr. Winters explained in her case study. The guard's compassionate approach became a therapeutic turning point, proof that connection could penetrate even profound delusions. 6 weeks later, James requested permission to visit Michael. Their first meeting was brief and awkward. Michael, heavily medicated, barely remembered their encounter. Yet James returned monthly, sometimes bringing books, or simply sitting quietly as Michael processed his recovering reality. During James's third visit, Michael revealed something transformative. While reviewing old photos in therapy, Michael discovered he had served alongside James's actual brother Paul, not the fictional David that James had invented during their confrontation. This cosmic coincidence created a genuine bond transcending their traumatic first meeting. Finding out he'd served with Paul felt like permission to actually care about what happened to him, James shared a year later. James's experience catalyzed significant changes in security protocol. The mental health training module expanded from a 4-hour seminar to a mandatory 3-day program for all palace security personnel. The program, now called the Harrington Protocol, has been adopted by security forces in 14 countries. We've seen a 43% reduction in use of force incidents involving individuals in psychological distress since implementing this training, reported Commander Knightley of the Metropolitan Police. For Michael, recovery came in small steps. He moved into supported living after 8 months of treatment and began volunteering at a community garden. The delusions never completely disappeared, but with medication and therapy, he learned to manage them. 3 years after their confrontation, James and Michael stood together at a mental health awareness conference. The audience fell silent as they recounted their experience from opposite sides of a crisis. Michael spoke of the darkness that had enveloped him and the unexpected light that came from being seen as a person rather than a threat. James described the moment he chose connection over protocol. In the quiet after the storm, what remains is profound. A moment when training, empathy, and human connection converged to save lives. The Harrington Protocol has transformed security approaches worldwide, but its true power lies in its simplicity, seeing the person behind the crisis. This story reminds us that our strongest defenses are woven from understanding and compassion. When James chose connection over confrontation, he saved a life and pioneered a new paradigm for crisis response. Perhaps true heroism lies in extending humanity when faced with its absence. How might we incorporate this compassion into our daily lives, creating hope where despair once stood?